Hi everyone, welcome to the Shipping Smarter video series. Today's episode is on manual handling processing surcharges. So this is a fairly new surcharge introduced a few years ago, and we're finding it's gaining traction with many of the carriers. So why is it charged? Basically it comes down to inconvenience for the carrier and based on the products that you send. So the transport industry works on extremely small margins, sometimes as low as a few percent net profit per year. And some of the carriers are actually charging less now than they were 20 years ago. When I was selling transport over 25 years ago, before SmartSend, I was selling it at rates that were dearer than some of the carriers are charging today. So you're probably wondering, how can they do this? And it comes down to automation. There's three key areas that the carriers have focused on over the last 10, 20 years, and that's basically conveyor systems. So the conveyors help sort the freight, and there's less manual handling required, and that's very important for the carriers to keep their costs low. Secondly, automated sortation and scanning systems. As part of these conveyor systems, there's also inbuilt automated sortation systems, so that automatically sorts the freight for them so that humans don't have to do it, and that obviously cuts down cost and saves them time and money. And thirdly, driver routing. That's gaining more and more impotence with a lot of the carriers these days, particularly the bigger ones that can afford to put these systems in place. And that's just allows the drivers to run through an efficient delivery run for their day. And even if jobs change throughout the day and jobs are removed or added, the system automatically updates and provides the driver with the most efficient route possible to deliver those parcels throughout the day. So why and when are manual handling surcharges incurred? Basically, it comes down to products moving through their system that cause them higher costs to process than what they've planned for, basically. So when a carrier provides you with a proposal and rates, they've based it on, it might be a basic charge and a per kilo rate, or it might be a per item charge. But what they haven't taken into account is other charges that inconvenience them. And we'll get into those further throughout the video. They also want to ensure that your goods are delivered within normal timeframes. However, to do this, they do need to charge extra for any extra costs that they're incurring that they haven't budgeted for. So what are the types of scenarios where these charges occur? From our experience, these are the most common. The first is a length of your product exceeding a limit for that carrier. Now, to explain this, here's an example of a long tube, and on the right is that image of the conveyor belt system in a transport depot. Now, one of the issues with long items is you can see the bend here in this conveyor system. It's fairly tight. Some carrier systems are actually tight. The bends can be tighter than this, depending on how much room they've got in the depot. But basically what happens is when an item gets to be too long, it actually can't go around the bend in the conveyor system. And what happens is it gets stuck, and obviously all the other freight moving behind it gets stuck, and eventually either it damages the item that's stuck and breaks it, or the whole system comes to a stop. And when that happens is the operation staff, the whole conveyor belt system stops, the whole operation stops, so that costs them time and money. And obviously then someone needs to go and remove that item from the back, from where it's stuck, and get the operation moving again. So that's one of the issues with longer items. Now, each carrier has their own limits on what it is, but what we've seen is it can start as early as anything longer than 1 metre. Some carriers are 1 metre 20, some carriers are 1 metre 50, and so on. So each carrier can be different depending on their conveyor systems or their requirements for lengths. The second issue we've seen is exceeding a dead weight for your product. So this can start from anywhere from 20 kilos in dead weight, and some carriers are 25 kilos, others are 30 kilos. But basically it comes down to increasing injury and work cover claims for their staff that are moving the product in their depots, or for drivers collecting the goods. And for them, they want to keep those obviously to a minimum and eliminate them if possible. So staff safety is paramount when they're lifting heavy items. So what it means is when you're sending heavy items, sometimes in the depots it means a 2-man lift, or items need to be moved onto a pallet where consolidated with other product, and then a forklift lifts that pallet and moves those products around the depot to then be sorted to wherever they need to go to their end destination. So obviously that incurs extra costs for the carriers, and again, it's something they haven't budgeted for in their proposal to you, original proposal. So it's just something that you need to be aware of when moving heavy items. Thirdly, products that are wrapped in plastic or bubble wrap or shrink wrap. Now, as you can see here, the item on the left here is a box that's been wrapped in bubble wrap. Now, firstly, before we even talk about the manual handling situation, we actually don't recommend you put bubble wrap around the outside of a box. We do recommend that you actually package the product well internally within the box, either with bubble wrap and other packaging material, instead of putting it around the outside. So what happens is, when bubble wrap's around the outside of a box, some carriers don't like that, because what happens is the bubble wrap can get caught on other freight and ripped, or somewhere within the system it can get ripped. And what happens is that bubble wrap can actually get loose and actually get caught within the conveyor belt slats. And what happens is that actually can then bring the whole operation to a stop. That gets caught in the mechanisms below the conveyor belt, and the whole system stops. And you can imagine at the end of a day, when there's tens of thousands of products trying to be sorted to move on to their end destination, put into trucks to move on to where they're going to. If that operation stops for even a few minutes, let alone 5 or 10 or 20 minutes, that costs them a lot of money, and sometimes it can actually stop trucks getting out on time to get to their, if they're going interstate, they need to leave by a certain time to make it there to be unloaded on time the next day. So bubble wrap on the outside of boxes is disliked by some carriers. Secondly, the product on the right hand, the image on the right hand side here, you can see is wrapped in plastic. Again, another issue for some carriers, because that plastic can get loose and again get caught slip into the conveyor belt slats and get caught within the mechanism to stop that conveyor belt system. So what the staff are told to do is, when they see product wrapped in bubble wrap, in plastic or shrink wrap, they're told to actually put that aside. So when the driver gets back at the end of a day from picking up the goods, he puts it aside, and that is manually handled throughout the depot by a human being, or again put onto a pallet where a forklift moves it around, and again manually moved into the right position or into the right truck to go to its end destination. Here's some other images. Again, this is a product wrapped in plastic. Again, that can get ripped and get caught in the conveyor belts. And the final picture here is again an awkward-looking product that is wrapped in plastic. So any of those scenarios can be a problem for some carriers, and we'll describe which carriers they are later, and the types of issues that can occur with pricing and so on. The next one is bulky bags. So that's anything that's sent that isn't in an actual courier satchel. So courier satchels are fine. So the image here on the right is fine with most carriers. One carrier that doesn't like courier satchels through their system, where the manual handling surcharge applies, is TNT/FedEx. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But for example, if products sent in Hessian bags, or just large, we've seen people send product in rubbish bags and tied up, which is not a good idea. So any of those situations, again, the product can get ripped or torn. It can cause problems, so some carriers don't like it, and they will charge that manual handling charge for the privilege of moving that product through their system. The next one is strapping around packages. So the image on the left here, you can see that it's wrapped with the plastic strapping. Now, that's understandable why people do that, but what happens is that if that strapping breaks, again, it's a very similar situation to the plastic that we mentioned earlier. It can get caught in the conveyor belt slats and again stop the operation. So the carriers the staff are told not to put product with strapping around them onto the conveyor belt. So again, it has to be handled manually, and that obviously adds to extra cost. Similarly, the image on the right here, you can see there are 3 items wrapped together with packaging tape. So what happens there is similar situation. Either the packaging tape can get loose, or the other problem is that those items, if the packaging tape breaks, those 3 items can actually be separated in transit. And what happens is only one of the items, as you can see by this image, has a shipping label on it. The other 2 items won't have any kind of marking on it, most likely, and so the carrier then has to put those items aside, try and figure out who they belong to and where they need to go, and that costs them time and money. So what happens in those situations again is they don't move them down the conveyor belt just in case they break apart during movement, and again they're handled manually. The other one is glass items. Now, some carriers are fine with glass, others aren't. For example, Couriers Please and Fastway, Aramax, from our experience, are fine with glass generally. For retailers or wholesalers that send glass professionally day in, day out, they don't like glass items be moved in a one-off shipment from a consumer though. But some carriers don't, or actually won't move glass. So, for example, TNT and FedEx and Star Trek won't move glass. The problem with glass in some situations is if it breaks in transit inside a box or whatever, it can cause injury to staff. And we have heard of really bad situations where a operations staff member has gone to pick up a box and they haven't known that there's glass broken that's sticking out from the bottom of it or the side, and literally their hand has been totally cut and they've had to go to hospital and get major operations. And that obviously again is a major issue to staff members and obviously work cover claims and so on. The other issue is clean-up costs. You can imagine a vehicle which has glass broken all through the bottom of that vehicle. What you don't want as a shipper of goods is particularly your product having glass fragments attached to it from someone else's broken glass, and being delivered to your customer, and then potentially them getting injured from glass as well. So what happens is when those vehicles have glass throughout the bottom of the vehicle, they have to literally stop the vehicle, or they bring it back to the depot if it's not already there, take every single item out of the truck, clean up the bottom of that vehicle with all the glass, and then repack the vehicle and send it back out. So that obviously is a major issue for carriers, or can be a major issue, which a lot of them don't like. So just be aware with glass items that can be the case, and we'll talk about again which carriers that is later. Liquid products are similar situations to glass. Now, some carriers are fine with liquids. For example, carriers we use like Couriers Please and Aramax are fine, Allied Express. Others aren't, like TNT and Star Trek. So similar situation to the glass. If the seal breaks and liquid leaks, or if the bottle breaks in transit, there can be extremely high cleanup costs, whether it's in a depot again or within a vehicle. What you don't want also is your product being soiled or damaged from that liquid and being delivered to your customers. So the carrier has to stop that vehicle, remove all the product, clean up all the liquid from the bottom of that vehicle, and reload the vehicle and send it on its way. So liquids can be a problem for some carriers, and some won't move them as well. Magnets are a bit of a peculiar one. They're generally fine for most carriers, but we are aware Star Trek doesn't like them. They will charge a manual handling processing charge for moving them. Not entirely sure the reason, but I believe it's to do with magnets potentially causing compatibility issues in loads with other products that don't want magnets next to them. So if there are magnets sent, some carriers need to know that, and they will put that product aside, handle it manually separately from other customers' goods, and then load it into a certain section of the vehicle where it can be loaded safely and not cause problems. The other one is fragile, having fragile or handle with care stickers or wording on your packages. Now, you can see by this image here, fragile stickers are commonplace with a lot of shippers, and you're probably wondering, or you're probably thinking, that's a carrier's requirement to look after your package, and why should you pay extra for that? However, what we're finding is some carriers actually deem this as a special service, and it needs to be handled separately and specially away from other freight, and not put through their system or their conveyor belt system with other freight, and also loaded into special parts of a line haul vehicle to be transshipped to wherever it's going to. So when some carriers see the handle with care or fragile markings on a package, they actually, again, the drivers are told, put that aside. It's put onto a pallet and moved specially to a different section of the depot and handled with other fragile items. And for that privilege, they do charge the manual handling processing fee. Now, again, that's not all carriers. For example, Couriers Please, Aramax, Allied, and some others that we use are fine. What we do here is that TNT, FedEx, and Star Trek, in some cases, do charge that fee. So just be aware of that if you are placing handle with care or fragile stickers on your product. Now, the final one is packaging types. Now, these are the packaging types we've heard and found that there are issues. So, for example, tubes, like the image down the bottom of the screen there. Tubes, one of the main issues is the length of them in some cases. So that obviously breaches the limit that's allowed for their conveyor belt systems and the bends in those. The other issue with tubes or unstable product is when the drivers or the operation staff place tubes onto conveyor belts, they place them a certain way up so that the shipping label and the barcode on it can be scanned as the item travels through the conveyor belt, and it gets to the point where the scanning of that item occurs. But the problem with tubes is they can obviously roll and they don't stay stable in one position, as opposed to a carton, for example. And so what happens is when it gets to that scanning point, if it's moved and the shipping label and the barcode is not scannable, then it continues on and it actually doesn't get sorted properly. And so it can potentially go around the conveyor belt again, or it has to be manually handled. And that's why we find that a lot of the carriers that charge these surcharges tell their staff not to put tubes onto the conveyor belt systems because of potentially that issue, as well as the length issue. Now, the other one is flat packs. Now, flat packs, the main issue we believe is the strapping that is usually put around flat packs. Again, we mentioned strapping before and the issue around it breaking in transit. And also the other potential issue with flat packs, we believe, is they usually end up can be a deadweight issue. It can be over a certain weight or over a certain size. So again, for some of these carriers, their staff are told if it's a flat pack, put it aside, and it needs to be manually handled. Rolls are similar to tubes. So, for example, rolls of rugs or other types of products, either it's a length issue or it's a stability issue where it won't sit correctly on the conveyor belts. So that, again, rolls can be manually handled or will be manually handled with these carriers. Lengths, for example, lengths of steel, usually they come down to they're not packaged in boxes, for example, and they are either over a certain length. So again, they are usually manually handled and moved around with a forklift or a two-man, depending on the weight, two-man situation. Pallets and skids, again, are usually a dead weight issue. They're manually handled with forklifts, and again, some of these carriers will charge a manual handling for those situations, similar to crates. Usually they're either a dead weight issue or sometimes a length issue. Items strapped together, they're a problem similar to the one that we showed a few slides ago. They either can come loose in transit or the packaging around them the tape or the strapping can break. So again, they're manually handled to avoid that issue. And finally, unpackaged items. Again, they're something that is generally manually handled. They don't want them on the conveyor belt systems from our understanding, like the image there of that bull bar. So there's some of the things that can basically occur in transit and the reason for the manual handling. The current carriers that we find charge these manual handling surcharges are TNT, FedEx, Star Trek Express, and also Allied Express. They're the ones that SmartSend uses that we know charge those surcharges. So I suppose you're thinking, how do you work out the shipping pricing and ensure that you don't get stung once you ship the goods? So at SmartSend, we include the manual handling surcharge in our shipping costs in the following circumstances. So when a length is exceeded, so we know of those carriers that charge the manual handling surcharge when, what length limits they allow. And if your item exceeds that length, then when you get a shipping cost from SmartSend, the manual handling surcharge is included in that shipping cost. So for example, if a carrier says, their maximum is 120 centimetres before a manual handling surcharge is applied, and you send something at 140 centimetres, then our price for that carrier includes the manual handling surcharge. So we won't contact you later saying you need to pay extra for the manual handling. Same with the deadweight. If a deadweight surcharge is exceeded, deadweight limit is exceeded, then our price for that carrier will include the manual handling surcharge as well. And finally, a packaging type. So if you send a product, for example, in that previous slide, that's a tube, a flat pack, a pallet, a length, anything that's potentially a manual handling surcharge with the carrier, our price to you includes that manual handling surcharge. So the beauty of that is that if the price returned includes the surcharge, that you can potentially choose a cheaper carrier that doesn't charge a manual handling surcharge, for example, if required. So that's the beauty of us including that surcharge. Now, there are scenarios where our system won't include the manual handling surcharge in the shipping costs that we show. Now, that's a lot of these come down to potentially a lot of the things we've just discussed in the video. So packages that are wrapped in plastic or shrink wrap or bubble wrap. Now, you might say that you might declare the item as a carton, and so our system won't. So just so you know, a carton for every single carrier that we use is fine to be used. It doesn't incur the manual handling surcharge. Only if obviously a weight or length limit is exceeded, then it will. But as a description of a package, if you choose carton, then that's fine. It doesn't include a manual handling surcharge. Now, the only problem though is obviously if you add plastic or shrink wrap or bubble wrap around the outside of that carton, then you will incur the manual handling surcharge. So what happens is the carrier charges SmartSend when they bill us, and we'll need to notify you that there's extra charges to pay for the manual handling because of the plastic and shrink wrap that you put around the package. Similarly, large or bulky bags or Hessian bags, and we discussed this before, anything that's not a courier satchel, you will incur a manual handling surcharge with those carriers we described. Star Trek generally is fine though, if as long as it's a courier satchel, but TNT is not. They will charge for a courier satchel. Strapping used around the carton. So SmartSend does not know when you get a quote from us whether you're going to decide to put strapping around that carton or that package. So if you do, just be aware with those carriers that the manual handling surcharge will apply, and if you do that, we will bill you later on because of strapping being used around the cartons or the packages. Similarly, if you send glass or liquids or magnets, as you know, we don't ask for the contents of your shipment for any domestic shipments. So if you send glass or liquids, we do have a warning on the website when you are going through the booking process on the SmartSend site. We do notify you if a carrier says that they will not move glass or liquids or magnets. And if you choose to still send it with that carrier through our system, then be aware, you'll get an invoice later on from SmartSend with an admin fee, notifying you that there's extra charges because those products were sent with that particular carrier. And finally, if you use a fragile or a handle with care sticker on the outside of the package. So all of these again are for those three carriers we mentioned: TNT/FedEx, Star Trek Express, or Allied Express in some of these situations. So just be mindful when shipping that these issues can occur. If you're uncertain and you need some help with particular products that you send, we're here to help. So just email us at sales@smartcn.com.au with any questions. We're happy to jump on a phone call. When you email us, if you can just maybe attach some images of how you send those products, what the products are, and we can definitely let you know which carriers that may apply for. And just so you know, look, on the first occasion that this may occur, we're not here to penalise you ongoing. We want to work with you to try and make sure this doesn't happen all the time for you. So we're happy to waive the first charge or two, but what we'd like to do is obviously make just so you're aware moving forward that which carriers charge it, which don't, so that ongoing we're not constantly having to SmartSend doesn't want to wear those costs ongoing for you obviously as well. So we're here to help. We want to try and sort it out so that ongoing when those situations may occur. Look, from our perspective, this is only the beginning. We work with seven of the major carriers here in Australia. There are plenty of other carriers that no doubt charge this charge as well, and there's only going to be more moving forward as e-commerce continues to grow. There's going to be more and more strains on the transport industry, and they need to control their costs. They need to make sure that they're running a streamlined system so they can deliver on time for you. And so in those situations, where they find that they're going to incur extra costs, they're going to start charging those fees. And what we've seen over the last few years is, one carrier introduced it 3 or 4 years ago. We found that a lot of customers stopped using them for that particular product where manual handling surcharges occurred, and they started using other carriers. And then the other carriers started realising they were moving more and more of this product that was harder for them to move in their eyes. And so they introduced the manual handling surcharge, and then customers moved to it. And we just see this, the product moving from carrier to carrier to carrier. And eventually, as carriers realise they're moving more and more of this product, that it's harder for them to move, they're going to start introducing the surcharge. So just be aware, it will continue. It will be charged by more and more carriers over the years to come. But we're here to help. We're here to try and streamline that process as much as possible for you. We also released a blog post a few months ago on our Shipping Smarter blog. That it's listed there on the screen. Why we think it's very wise to use cartons to ship your product, if at all possible. We understand that it's not possible for all product, but if possible, we do recommend using cartons. It really just streamlines the whole process. You eliminate a lot of the manual handling processing surcharges in a lot of cases, and it also your product is protected better in most cases, and it gets delivered a lot more efficiently, we find. And finally, we have our new Shipping Smarter book that we've just released. So we talk about a lot of this sort of stuff around surcharges, not just manual handling surcharges, but a lot of extra surcharges that e-commerce merchants can expect to receive in transport. So we talk about that a lot in the book, as well as products, how to source, what type of products to source, how to package those products correctly, types of issues you might incur in transport, whether it's pickup address, delivery addresses, things to consider when delivering to home addresses, e-commerce platforms to use, how to streamline your shipping, a whole range of different products, tips and tricks, and also customer stories. So if you get a chance, I would highly recommend getting our Shipping Smarter book. It's just a great tool to use for any e-commerce merchant, whether you're a customer of ours or not. So that's available now on amazon.com.au in Kindle version, and also in physical book you can get delivered. So thank you for listening, and we look forward to working with you. Thanks. Bye.